The thing about being dismissed by your own family is that, eventually, you just stop resisting it. You let them cling to whatever version of you they've decided is true, and you quietly build the real version of your life somewhere beyond their line of sight. I figured that out around my 3rd year of surgical residency, when Mom asked if I was still doing that med school thing and seemed genuinely surprised I hadn't quit yet. By my 5th year, after my work on experimental trauma procedures had been published in the New England Journal of Medicine, she was proudly telling her book club that I did something technical at a hospital. By 33, I'd stopped trying to correct her altogether. "Marcus, tell everyone about your promotion," Mom said, smiling radiantly at my older brother across the Christmas dinner table. The dining room of my parents' suburban Boston home looked like a department store display, every inch covered in tinsel, lights, and enough festive clutter to give an elf a headache. Marcus sat up straighter, ready to perform. "Well, I've just been promoted to senior project manager," he said. "It's a big deal. I'll be leading multiple development teams and reporting directly to the VP of engineering." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, clapping her hands. "A real leadership position. Your father and I couldn't be prouder." Dad gave an approving nod. "That's what a career should look like, taking charge, making real decisions." My younger sister, Diane, jumped in from her end of the table, "And I just made partner at my firm. Youngest person in firm history to make partner before 35. The room erupted in cheerful congratulations again. Everyone loved milestones they could easily categorize: titles, promotions, partnerships, tangible proof that someone was winning at adulthood. Then Mom turned toward me with that look, the one that combined affection with disappointment, like she was staring at a houseplant that kept drooping no matter how often she watered it. "And Jordan, how's that computer work going?" she asked. I took a slow sip of wine. "It's going well, thanks." "Still down in that hospital basement?" Dad asked, his tone implying I might as well be living in a storage closet. "I work at Massachusetts General," I said. "Doing IT stuff?" Marcus asked. Not unkindly, he genuinely believed it. They all did. Tech support, fixing printers, rebooting systems. "I handle technology in a medical setting," I said, which wasn't a lie. Surgical robotics were technology, so were advanced imaging systems. The modern operating room ran on both. Mom patted my hand, her expression soft and pitying. "Well, hospital work is steady, even if it's just technical support. Not everyone needs to be in leadership. The important thing is you've got stability." Diane's husband, the corporate attorney who'd joined the family 2 years ago, leaned forward with the confidence of a man about to dispense valuable advice. "Have you thought about getting certified in hospital administration?" he asked. "IT skills are useful, but if you want to move up, you need business credentials. I could introduce you to a few people in healthcare management." "That's kind of you," I said evenly, "but I'm comfortable where I am." "There's not much room for advancement in tech support," Marcus added, his managerial instincts kicking in. "You're 33, Jordan. You should start thinking about leadership, about growth, building something." Dad set down his fork, that signature gesture that meant the lecture was coming. "Your brother's right," he said. "You've been at that computer job for what, 8 years now? At some point, you need to show ambition, take on responsibility, make something of yourself." I'd been chief of surgery at Massachusetts General for 14 months. Before that, vice chief. Before that, head of trauma surgery. I supervised over 200 physicians across 11 departments. Just last month, I'd led a 17-hour operation separating conjoined twins, coordinating specialists from 4 countries. But sure, I needed to show ambition. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, refilling my wine. Mom exhaled softly. "We just worry about you, sweetheart. Marcus has his management track. Diane's a partner, they're both building real legacies. You're bright, Jordan. You could do more than fix computers in a hospital basement." "I appreciate the concern," I said. "Have you at least gotten a raise lately?" Dad asked. "Boston's expensive. I hope they're paying you decently for the tech work." My total compensation last year was north of 800 grand, not counting bonuses or speaking engagements. My so-called basement workspace was actually a corner office on the 8th floor, overlooking the Charles River. but I just smiled and said, "I'm doing fine financially, Dad." The conversation thankfully drifted elsewhere: Diane's courtroom victory, Marcus's new house, Mom's latest book club drama. I slipped into the background, which was my usual spot during family gatherings. Let them keep their stories, the fiction of the underachieving youngest child who tinkered with hospital computers. The truth was too tangled to explain, and they'd long ago proven they didn't want to hear it. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. I ignored it, probably a consult my on-call team could manage. Christmas dinner wasn't the time for work unless it was truly urgent. Then it buzzed again, and again. I slid it out beneath the table, just enough to read the screen. 3 messages from my assistant, all marked urgent. Mass casualty incoming. Multi-vehicle pileup on I-93. 15 critical injuries. All trauma teams mobilizing. We need you. Multiple complex traumas. Team requesting your presence. A 4th notification came through as my pager erupted, the unmistakable tone that meant an actual emergency. The table fell silent. "What's that noise?" Mom asked, frowning. "Is your phone broken?" "It's a pager," I said, standing and unclipping it from my belt. The display read exactly what I expected. Trauma alert. Mass casualty. Chief of surgery required. Immediate response. A pager? Marcus chuckled. "Those still exist? I thought only doctors used." He stopped mid-sentence as the realization hit him. I was already halfway down the hallway, scrolling through the incident report on my phone. 15 victims. Several critical. At least 3 in need of immediate surgical intervention. 2 of them children. This wasn't going to be good. My phone rang, the custom tone I used for my trauma coordinator. I answered while pulling my coat from the closet. "Dr. Williams, we've got a developing situation." Sarah's voice was composed but tense, the calm of someone who'd seen too many disasters but never stopped caring. "Multi-car pileup on I-93 northbound," she said. "Initial responders are reporting at least 15 critical injuries. All trauma teams are being activated. But we need you here. Several cases will need your hands." "What's the current breakdown?" I asked, already sorting priorities in my head. 3 with major thoracic trauma, 2 complex orthopedics, 1 massive internal bleed, and 2 pediatric head traumas, plus others still being triaged. The ER's about to be maxed out. Then initiate disaster protocol. Get every available or team called in. Clear operating rooms 2 through 7. Page neuro for the ped's head injuries and bring in Dr. Patterson. I'll be there in 20. "Already on it," she said. "How soon can we expect you?" 15 minutes. I hung up and turned to find my entire family gathered in the hallway, staring at me, a mix of confusion and disbelief frozen on their faces. "What was that about?" Dad asked. "Why were you talking about operating rooms?" I shrugged into my coat and checked my go bag, always packed with scrubs, ID badge, and the essentials. "Mass casualty event. I have to get to the hospital." "But your IT support," Mom said, her voice high with confusion. "Why would they call you for a medical emergency?" "I'm not IT support, Mom. I'm a surgeon." "A surgeon?" Diane repeated, her tone incredulous. "Since when?" "Since I finished my residency 9 years ago. Since I completed my trauma fellowship 8 years ago. Since I started as an attending 7 years back." I moved toward the door, but they had formed a loose barrier across the entryway. Marcus stepped forward, his face shifting between confusion and something bordering on anger. "Hold on, you're saying you're a doctor? A surgeon? And you've been letting us think you fix computers all this time?" "I never said I worked in IT, I replied. "You all assumed that. And after the 15th time you brushed off my explanations, I stopped correcting you." My phone rang again. "Dr. Williams," Sarah said. "First ambulance is 2 minutes out. Severe chest trauma. Possible cardiac involvement. Trauma 1's prepped, we need you." "On my way." I ended the call and met my mother's wide eyes. "I'm the chief of surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital," I said. "I've held that position for over a year. Before that, I ran the trauma surgery division for 3. I'm also an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, and I've published 47 peer-reviewed papers. Now, if you'll excuse me, there are 15 people who might die if I don't leave right now." The hallway went silent. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's mouth opened and closed, trying to find words. Marcus looked like someone had just hit him in the chest. The chief of surgery, Diane whispered. At Mass General? Yes. But we thought you worked in tech support, in the basement. I know, I said. You've mentioned it at every holiday dinner for nearly a decade. My phone buzzed again, pager blaring its urgent tone. The situation was escalating fast. People were being loaded into ambulances, and the clock was already running. I stepped past them and opened the front door. The cold December air hit me, sharp, bracing, real. Jordan, wait, Mom called, her voice cracking. You can't just leave, we need to talk about this. I'll call you later, I said over my shoulder, heading toward my car, a Tesla Model S they'd always assumed was leased beyond my IT salary. Right now, there are lives waiting on me. I was sliding into the driver's seat when Marcus came running out, shoes slipping on the icy driveway. He caught the door before I could close it. Just, hold on. His breath fogged in the cold. You're really the chief of surgery, the Mass General. That's one of the top hospitals in the country. Usually top 3, I said. Sometimes number 1, depending on the rankings. And you let us give you advice about climbing into hospital management? You seemed to enjoy it, I said lightly. Didn't want to spoil the fun. His expression twisted through a dozen emotions: embarrassment, disbelief, regret. I told you to be more ambitious, he muttered, to aim for a leadership role. I remember telling you that last Thanksgiving, said maybe if you worked hard, you could make IT supervisor. He let out a hollow laugh. Jesus. He stepped back, eyes wide with something close to shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We all are. We had no idea. I did try to tell you, more than once, I said evenly. Every time I mentioned med school, residency, or any of my research, someone would crack a joke about me playing doctor or switch topics. Eventually, I realized it wasn't a conversation you wanted to have. You'd already built a version of me that fit your expectations, and anything that didn't match just bounced off. My phone lit up again. Sarah, my trauma coordinator. For the 3rd time in 5 minutes, things were escalating fast. I really have to go. Marcus, people are dying. We'll talk later. I shut the door and backed out of the driveway, leaving him standing there in the cold, still looking stunned. In the rearview mirror, I saw the rest of the family spill out onto the porch, gathering in confusion and disbelief. Christmas dinner forgotten. The drive to Mass General took 13 minutes, a little faster than my estimate thanks to quiet holiday streets. I pulled into my reserved spot, the one clearly marked chief of surgery, and couldn't help thinking how surreal that sign would look to my family if they ever saw it. Inside, the hospital was already in full emergency mode, organized chaos. Disaster protocols had kicked in flawlessly. Trauma bays were cleared, staff were streaming in, and the intricate machinery of a level 1 trauma center was spinning at full speed. Sarah met me at the trauma wing entrance, walking briskly beside me, iPad in hand. First waves here, she said. 43-year-old male, flail chest, possible cardiac tamponade, he's in trauma 1. Second ambulance 30 seconds out. Pediatric female, 8 years old, severe head trauma. Third wave en route, multiple crush injuries. I was already moving, my brain slotting back into surgical focus. The family drama, the disbelief, the years of being misunderstood, it all fell away. This was where I belonged. This was who I was. Not fixing hospital computers, but making decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Trauma Bay 1 was controlled pandemonium. My team was already there, 2 seasoned trauma surgeons, an anesthesiologist, 3 nurses, all moving like clockwork. The patient on the table was in rough shape, unstable chest wall, labored breathing, vitals tanking. Talk to me, I said, snapping on gloves as I stepped up. Dr. Rachel Kim, one of my senior attendings, gave a rapid rundown. Multiple rib fractures, paradoxical movement, hypotension, tachycardia, Beck's triad present, looks like tamponade. I ran my own quick assessment, hands and eyes confirming what experience already suspected. Distended neck veins, muffled heart sounds, dropping pressure, classic pericardial effusion. The heart was being strangled by its own blood. Get me the ultrasound, I said. Prep for emergency pericardiocentesis. If that fails, we're going straight to thoracotomy. The ultrasound confirmed it, large effusion, heart under compression, no time for the oar. I guided the needle with practiced precision, finding the right angle, the right depth, threading carefully into the pericardial sac without puncturing the heart itself. The monitors were screaming, the anesthesiologist calling out falling sats. Then, resistance, and release. Dark, pressurized blood filled the syringe. The heart expanded again. The patient's vitals climbed. Alarms quieted. That's it, I said. Keep monitoring. If he stabilizes, take him upstairs for a definitive repair. Rachel, you're in charge here. Got it, Chief. I was already crossing to the next bay, the 8-year-old girl with head trauma. Pediatric neurosurgery required its own kind of control, the kind that locked emotion away until the work was done. The next 6 hours blurred into a relentless rhythm, rapid decisions, precise hands, a dozen critical saves. The man with the tamponade pulled through and went to the ICU stable. The little girl underwent a complex craniotomy to evacuate a subdural hematoma, prognosis good. A teenager with a ruptured spleen got an emergency splenectomy. 2 orthopedic trauma cases stabilized and moved to surgery. By 2 a.m., the worst was over. 15 critical arrivals, 13 alive and stable, 2 gone before we could intervene, 1 catastrophic head injury, 1 with internal trauma beyond repair. 2 losses out of 15 wasn't just acceptable, it was exceptional. But numbers never softened the weight of the outcome. Every death still landed hard, a silent reminder that even at your best, you don't win them all. I was in the staff lounge by then, slumped in a chair, coffee in hand, scrubs streaked with blood, finishing my last bit of charting when Sarah appeared. Chief, she said, you've got about 40 missed calls on your personal phone. Should I be concerned? Family, I said dryly. They just learned what I actually do for a living. She raised an eyebrow. How did they think you paid for that Beacon Hill penthouse? They figured I rented a tiny apartment somewhere and had a really generous credit limit. That's, she trailed off, half laughing. Chief, you're the head of surgery at Mass General. You're literally on CNN. You testified at the state legislature last year. They don't watch medical news, I said. They don't follow healthcare policy. And when I tried to tell them, they only heard what fit their version of me, and tuned out the rest. I took another swallow of the awful coffee. Letting them cling to their version of me had always been easier than constantly trying to rewrite it. But you're one of the top trauma surgeons in the country, Sarah said. You've pioneered 2 surgical techniques. You've saved hundreds of lives. To them, I was just the family underachiever, I replied. The kid who never matched Marcus's project management career or Diane's partnership at a law firm. Sarah slowly shook her head. That's genuinely wild. What finally changed tonight? Mass casualty. They heard the call come in, saw the pager, listened to me run point on a trauma response. Kind of hard to keep the IT guy in the basement story going when someone keeps calling you chief of surgery on speakerphone. She let out a laugh. That must have been satisfying. More complicated than that. Mostly just sad. 8 years of being underestimated by the people who were supposed to know me best. My phone buzzed again. Mom, please call. We need to understand. Why didn't you tell us? Dad, we're proud of you. We should have listened. Please come back so we can talk. Marcus, I'm an idiot. I gave the chief of surgery at Mass General career advice. I will never recover from this. Diane, why didn't you correct us? We made total fools of ourselves. I set the phone down. They could wait. I had charts to finish, orders to finalize, and 2 families to meet who were about to have their holidays shattered. The family drama would still be there later. The work, the real work, came first. Sarah watched me over the rim of her cup. You gonna call them? Eventually, just not tonight. They're probably spiraling right now. Probably, but I've been sitting through family dinners for years, listening to lectures from people who didn't even know what I do. They can manage one night of uncertainty. She gave me a crooked smile. That's a little ruthless, Chief. No, I said. That's just reality. They built a version of me that made them feel successful and comfortable. They ignored everything that didn't fit. Now they're wrestling with the fallout. Welcome to my last 8 years. My hospital phone rang. ICU. Probably an update or a consult. I answered. slipping seamlessly back into the world that made sense. Dr. Williams. Chief, ICU. The tamponade patient's family is here. They'd like to speak to the surgeon who saved him. I'll be right there. I finished the bitter coffee, stood, and walked toward the ICU. This was the part of the job no one outside ever really saw. Not the drama in the trauma bay, but the aftermath, the families, the explanations, the grief and hope balanced on a knife's edge. In the waiting area, the patient's wife and 2 grown children looked exhausted and terrified. They jumped to their feet when they saw me. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Dr. Williams, Chief of Surgery. I operated on your husband. Is he going to be okay? Her voice trembled. He came in critically unstable. I explained gently. He had a condition called cardiac tamponade, blood building around the heart, stopping it from beating properly. We performed an emergency drainage procedure. He's sedated in the ICU now, but stable. The next 24 hours are important, but his outlook is good. She began to cry, a mix of fear unwinding and relief settling in. One of the adult children, a woman around my age, clutched my hand. Thank you. They said if you hadn't been here, if you hadn't acted so fast. I had an excellent team, I said truthfully, but yes, timing mattered. We talked for 20 minutes. I walked them through what had happened, what came next, what recovery might look like. I answered every question patiently, helped them understand what they'd just survived. This was the job, not the myth my family believed in, not some vague IT gig in a basement. The decisions, the procedures, the conversations that bent the arc of someone's life. When I finally left the hospital, it was close to 4 a.m. The city was silent and frozen, December air cutting sharp. More messages stacked up on my phone, mostly family, a few from colleagues checking in about the mass casualty. I drove home through empty streets, too wrung out to dwell on any of it. The penthouse, the one they thought was a cramped apartment, was dark and still when I walked in. Floor-to-ceiling glass looked out over Boston, the Charles glinting like a dark ribbon. I poured a real glass of wine and stood at the window, thinking about perception and reality, how people only see what fits their story. How exhausting it gets trying to rewrite someone else's version of your life. Another buzz. A text from Rachel Kim. Great work tonight, Chief. Tamponade patient stable. That save was textbook. You made the difference. I smiled at the message. Team effort, I replied, but I left her words glowing on the screen for a long moment. You made the difference. That was what mattered. Not their sudden pride. Not their scrambling to rewrite their narrative. Just this, the work. The lives saved, the quiet victories no one else saw. Tomorrow, I'd deal with the family. Maybe I'd accept their apologies, maybe not. Tonight, I was just tired, bone-deep tired. Tired from the hours in surgery, tired from years of being misread by people who should have known me best. I finished the wine and went to bed, somewhere in the suburbs. They were probably still awake, trying to reconcile who they thought I was with who I actually am. But I had surgery at 7 a.m., and their crisis of understanding wasn't my problem. They could figure it out on their own. I always had.